we do have a different standing to the rest of the Singapore. Thank you very much. Councillor Reynolds.
It's actually live on YouTube and video as well.
Councillor Reynolds.
I asked myself, what the benefits going to be? I can't see any. I've got a long memory, and I've seen amalgamation in the past in the joining of resources, and they've all led to huge costs on the local people and no advantages. And any continuation of that will do likewise. If we go back to, say, the Inanga earthquake, we didn't have organised people in positions in civil defence and things like we do now, but the community just rallied and put things together and was back together in a very short time. Because that's the sort of people you have that live here. But not only those that live here, but those that are attracted to come and live here generally share those values, and that's why they come here. They are separate and distinct and unique. And to see something like this planned by people on high to create a homogenous group around the country, to me, is similar to me going to Dunedin or Auckland and Christchurch and going to a mall, and they're all the same. And so for planners outside this region come to the conclusion that we're going to inflict these changes on you is going to create communities that do exactly that. The amalgamation of 3 councils here and the creation of regional council gave us a system of control of our rivers by regional council that just ignored this region, totally ignored it since 1989. The river with the highest flood flow in the country, totally ignored. And if we have a unitary council here, it's going to be centralised somewhere else, because we are a unique society with its our own individual settlements that are separate and distinct. Regional council based in Greymouth, Westport was over the horizon, the Buller River didn't exist, and the management of it to ensure that it didn't flood, as in 2021, just didn't happen, which gets this area a poor reputation. The move to amalgamate, pushed by a few people from Southwestern, I believe, or Western District. I think you mentioned earlier there were 176 of them. I've been through that list of ones that went to the Local Government Commission and said, we want to unite all councils on the coast. I've read through the list and I didn't recognise one person that came from this district. I believe that was it should not have happened. The Local Government Act says that the Local Government Commission can act if 10% of the electors of a district want change. There was no 10% electors from Buller District Council that wanted to change to unite with other councils. It was people from another district that wanted to amalgamate us with them. And through that, the Local Government Commission, when they were faced with defeat over total objection from this region, they forced a united district scheme called the TTPP. What's the cost of it? 5 million, 8 million? Each of the 3 district councils had their own scheme. And it's cost, combine those into one document, which is called the TTPP, cost millions upon millions of dollars inflicted upon the people of this region. The uniting in whether it's you've got a regional traffic plan or a regional rubbish plan, it's bloody ridiculous, to put it mildly, because we're separate and distinct. There's long distances between us, and to force this on this community from someone somewhere who suggested it, and we'll never find out who it was. Who's suggesting that we have these reforms? We say government, but who is it?
Oh, sorry, sir. Sorry, I'll jump in just so I'll quickly sum up. This isn't unique to the West Coast, just quickly. This is a national conversation at the moment about the future of local government. But just to pick up on your key points, a lack of evidence that amalgamation and centralisation has worked to date, I think is a fair enough point. Again, around the uniqueness of the people that live here, that number 8 wide can-do attitude, the people that are attracted to the district as well. So self-determination and choice are incredibly important. And then I summed it up as a headquarter bias, is probably kind of how I kind of summed it up in terms of key message out of that.
If we can sum it up by saying, if the people in this region are asked to vote on it, they'll vote against it. So we either live in a democracy or we don't, or we're being dictated to by bureaucrats in Wellington who have organised the politicians, I think, rather than the other way around.
So 100%, and that's why I think the process in terms of at the moment, we're in stage 1, they're asking for what does this first stage look like, but over the next couple of years is when the evidence base and the conversation also with the communities really does need to happen. I couldn't agree more.
Because yeah, to that point, sorry, Paul, to just add one thing, may not just be the West Coast. We also may need to consider what Councillor Connor said earlier on around top of the south. Because we need to look at that. Once we're past stage 1, if stage 1 moves to stage 2, we need to consider everything. We need to consider it as a biller unit to council the best way forward, potentially. So there's loads of options we need to consider. We're not there yet. This part is about helping us write the submission so we can move forward and then move into that next step.
I just make the observation that I think we're on a roller coaster, a railroad roller coaster. We're being railroaded. That's my opinion.
Understood. Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, interesting what I'm hearing and agree with just about all of it.
Thanks.
I will pick up on a couple of wee points and one in particular that Paul made. I was obviously on the council when this last reform went through, and one of the things that makes us or made us different at the time was that we had all but completed a review of our district plan. We were right at the sign-off point, and I'm aware that that wasn't the case in our two neighbouring. They were keen as mustard for a one plan because it absolved them of getting the people on board and going through that whole process that we had almost completed, and not at millions of dollars. I think we'd spent about 25,000 at the time. That's what our budget was. I admit that now, today, we probably would have now been required to consider a one plan because that's what they're suggesting around the region. But, you know, to the point that we were proactive, always have been, to my recollection, the Buller District Council's always been pretty forward thinking. And so as a consequence, not getting themselves into that position. Clearly the infrastructure and the big imposts on our ratepayers, you know, again, it's not because District Council didn't plan, it's because it's a different world now to what it was back in the day. What else makes us different? Well, you've heard a lot about it, but I would maintain that, and I would go back to the who we are aspect. You know, we run 2, 3, 4 trucking meetings. No one else on the coast does that. We got the strong, you know, Reef and Do. I mean, we've got some of the best bands, surfing competitions. I could go on and on and on. I think Ray made some reference to sporting clubs. The festival the other weekend. I know that other areas on the coast have their little events here and there, but I reckon if you looked across the total West Coast, you'd probably find that Buller's leading the way in many of these district activities engaging their communities. The other thing, and I know it's a hot topic, but we do potentially have the possibly only or the best port facility up and down the whole coast. If push came to shove and there was a major event, you know, I'm not saying that we're going to maintain it as a port in the interim because we probably can't afford to, but the potential's there for it to be re-energized as a port if push comes to shove. Also not spoken about, but in the event of a big collapse in our infrastructure, transport, we still have the opportunity to open up some opportunities from northern Buller to get through to Nelson. The Heafy Road I'm referring to, which is never going to happen in our time unless there is such a significant event that it becomes an absolute requirement in the future, and that's still a possibility. So what makes us different? Well, us around the table the people out there out on the street. We are Buller, and I like whoever it was, I think it was Ray said, I'm not a West Coaster, and I am not a West Coaster. I'm a Bullerite.
Thank you, councillor Rutherford. Mayor Russell?
What a bit of a hard act to follow, really. But anyway, I agree with all the points that have been made, but, you know, sort of taking a helicopter view of it all, I think, you know, what would be more helpful for the Buller is having a voice as a West Coast as well. That doesn't mean that a unitary council is necessarily going to give us that, but I think having a voice as Buller is one thing, but being able to work closely with the other councils and speak for the West Coast is another. I think Paul's example of centralisation, a working model, the West Coast Regional Council, hasn't delivered well for the Buller, and it hasn't delivered well, I understand, for the other districts either. So if that's an example of what centralisation is going to deliver, then I've got a big problem with that. I think, and you know, I stand to be challenged on this too, but having lived in Christchurch for 30 years, and being back here for a couple of years, I mean, there's more engagement, there is more interest from people in the Buller as to what is going on around the place, what council's doing, and what value we're adding around the table. If you're sitting in a big city, you know, Christchurch, for example, you know, most people are just getting on with their day-to-day stuff and not paying much attention to what's actually happening. And that picks up on the comments that have been made by, you know, a few of you around the table. It comes back to our identity. And we can't afford to lose that identity because there's a lot of momentum actually comes from that. And through centralisation, we can lose that quite easily. And in doing that, we'll lose the drive, and the issues that have been brought up around the table won't necessarily get attended to if we haven't got the community behind us. So the big risk I see in going this way is that we lose a nucleus of interest, dedication, etc., to grow this district going forward. Now, if somebody could put up a case to say, well, from the cost efficiency point of view, you know, we can make these savings and that outweighs everything else, then that would be great. But I don't see that it will ever outweigh everything else that we're talking about today.
Thank you. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, right.
Something unique. No, kidding.
Well,
This is the mic.
as a representative of the district with the coast's fourth largest town, which interestingly enough, in every single communication that comes out of Greymouth or anywhere else around the coast, never gets mentioned when towns on the west coast are mentioned. The fourth largest population centre, the only inland town, we're completely ignored, right? So what we really need to understand is even within our own district, we can end up with this kind of isolationism and parochialism, etc., etc. Broadly extend that out to the wider West Coast district, and you have an immense problem that's been ongoing since the beginning, basically, when Buller was Northwest Nelson, as we quite rightly had pointed out to us, and Grey District and Western District was Western District of Canterbury. So in other words, traditionally the Grey River was the boundary. It went up through the Blue Grey, which is Palmer's Bend Road, and Northwest Nelson extended right to the Grey River. Cobden, Northwest Nelson. So that was the standing in that time, and I'm just pointing these things out to you because, you know, when you take us, Reefton, you know, a major town in the Buller district, a major town on the West Coast, never ever mentioned in terms of towns when it comes to West Coast, right? So, okay, so I have a different view, right, from everybody else. I hear what everybody said. Everybody's really valid in the points they raise. But I think that I see that we need to have a more positive sort of slant in how we project ourselves. And I take for an example the land ownership on, you know, in Buller, etc., being largely central government controlled. but it's New Zealanders' land. New Zealanders have a vested interest in the Buller district, a large vested, 90%, basically, you know. So, in fact, we're not just Buller as Bullerites, we're Buller as representatives of the wider New Zealand population. And that's what we need to get them to understand. Okay, and that then broadly moves out to tourism. You know, we generate an awful lot of New Zealand's tourism. If we weren't here and didn't exist as a wider West Coast region, but in Buller, you know, New Zealand's tourism would basically almost disappear, I would imagine, because that's what we portray New Zealand as, you know. So we need to actually get that out there, that we, as a small group of people, carry a large burden on behalf of New Zealand. And New Zealand has a large vested interest in this region, whether they know it or not.
Just don't look at
So the
me.
messaging needs to go out as a positive messaging.
Yeah.
Turn it around. Turn it around and make sure that we end up being seen as kind of like the lungs of New Zealand, if you like. You know, when you're talking about forests being the lungs of the world, we're kind of the lungs of New Zealand, really. So that's one thing I'd like to say. Let's forget about being insular. Let's broadly go out there and be, you know, what we are. Sure, we're people with huge resilience. I think that's the way we are. But we're also people that are sitting in a cave and able to see a lot more than the wider New Zealander who's sitting out there in chaos land. You know, we can actually dial in and get things more crystal clear. We have got area to have clarity of thoughts. That's why we live here. Okay, so positive shit, people. You know, and that goes back into, you know, the funding, et cetera, and why we should be seen as a New Zealand funding source. Okay, let's go back into population spread, and this is back into why I get back to Northwest Nelson. You know, we don't gain much if we join multiple West Coast councils together. We don't. We have very little gain. We're in a very small closed loop that can have only tiny gains. The only way to get gain is to have shorten the distances. We've identified distance as our enemy. You know, Auckland to Wellington, basically. We need to shorten the distances, and the only way to do that is if we're going to amalgamate, we need to amalgamate sensibly in a distance shortening. And that's what the argument around going and still being Nelson, Marlborough, Buller, being Canterbury, West Coast, and then being Fiordland past Southland. It's shortening distances, and that's where you're going to get your best gain. And so that's what the other thing, positively portray how we want to see ourselves in the future. We don't want to be suffering tyranny of distance and tyranny of tiny population trying to survive on its own. So that's how we need to portray that. Shortening distances, increasing population, getting competitive advantages over stretching ourselves out, small population, destroying any potential gain that we can get by amalgamation. So, you know, I think that I pretty much covered it off, and that gets back to cost benefits. I think you'll find that they work out better. Cost benefit will work out better if we do that. Shorten distances, increase population. You know, and also I put down here, how do we protect and promote growth in a bigger system, i.e. the smaller fish? And I honestly think that having a system, if we go with the West Coast, we're all going to be facing the same issues. We're all going to be a series of small fish fighting for our pond space. Whereas in a more combined system, larger area, I think we'll have more chance of promoting that growth. Anyway, that's enough. Me finished. Stay positive. Try and make it work.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Just very quickly to sum up on some of it, start looking at that 90% of stewardship land as we are holding this on behalf of New Zealand, and that's an important distinction, which I think is really good. Staying positive, message received loud and clear. And also that we need to keep options open in terms of, is it best to go horizontal stripes or vertical stripes? It's probably one way of describing it. Do we anchor with larger urban centres? And the whole coast has this conversation. Yeah.
I think we need to recognise it as the only area of game.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
On the last one, so.
I'm so sorry.
My ideas
We'll
are,
start with you next time, Councillor O'Keefe.
no, everyone's.
Microphone, sorry.
Oh, yeah, everybody has like, I think everyone's on the right page. I mean, for me, the negatives would be that, agglomeration, which is that, that flow node from a centralised building and the flow node for that surrounding area, much like Development West Coast get at the moment, which is something that's not serving up the buller and its identity enough. Then again, losing identity. We covered all that sort of stuff. We beat our own drum, and it's that, the buller beating the drum. And at the end of the day, the world is going, I don't know if you've noticed, the world's going a little bit nuts. And people are coming back home. Right? Because our strength is relationships. And our strength is the history we have here. We can remember our great grandparents. We have all that. That's our strength. It's a safe place. Safe, people become back, it's home, right? Because we have a small population and because we are super local and because we have those amazing relationships where we know everybody, if anything happens, we're agile, we're quick, we can pivot. We're so resilient because, and we've probably got the most resilient population in the whole country because we're so small, we can make decisions just like that. And because we've got that trust, we've got that history, we've got those relationships, we have that superpower. People are disconnected now. They disconnected. People don't even talk to each other anymore. But the buller, we are special, we talk to each other, we share common interests, our kids are mates, we can talk to anybody on the street. I mean, try getting through New World. I mean, like, everyone knows everybody. And that is our superpower, that the world is losing touch with each other. And people are coming back for that and wanting to live here because of it. So that's, let me think, anything else? You've said everything. Agility, super localism, that is like that. We cannot lose that. That's our superpower. That is our strength. I'm not for centralisation at all. That's me.
Oh, thank you. That was the discussion. So, look, the opening part of this was to actually get a flavour around the room, right? So this is the opening part of the submission. This is where we state our case of what makes Bully unique and what are those key messages that we want government to understand at the start of this conversation. So the information, I'm up to 4 pages of notes. Hopefully, no, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was hoping for. So hopefully we recorded enough of it. John and I will review this. This will be the opening and the really buller front of the submission. So I hope we can do justice to the voices in terms of authoring this.
So we were asked to comment on what was unique, right? I did that on the understanding that we were then going to go into a discussion. And I just noted that others went into a discussion of their own points of view prior.
Yeah.
Are we going to have that discussion?
There will be many and varied discussions in the next hour. We've still got all of these questions to work through. And please, if you have something that you wish to express, please feel free.
I just heard expressions today. I'm not for unification. I'm not for that. And I'm going, well, that's preempting the discussion. And
Totally agreed.
we have different points of view on that.
So we will author the start. We will author the start of this document just of what makes us unique. Your individual views on amalgamation or standardization, pasteurization, etc. Those are things we will work through in time together. that it's good to hear them, it's good to record them and understand them, but we will take out those bits. We will leave those bits to the side for now.
Yeah, I think one thing to add just in that first point, there's a lot of common themes around the table, I think, that we'll be able to pull out, which is
Yeah.
good.
And of course, there's going to be differences of opinion, and there will be throughout the next couple of years of this process as well. So that was scene setting for the day. Thank you very, very much for a start. These are the submission questions that we're just going to work through now. So these are the ones that the government's actually said, hey, give us some feedback on it. This is where we'll start digging a little bit deeper in terms of what the legislative changes or the reform that they're looking at putting forward as well. So the first question that they posed was, do you agree that there is a need to simplify local government? I think if we can quickly work around the room and see where we land on that, we're actually going to come back to the second question right at the end, because I don't think right now we'll be able to answer. I think it makes a lot more sense at the end of the workshop to have a discussion about the proposed approach. So we might go the other way around, just see if we can land on a common position, or at least close enough, good enough for now, and we'll put that draft out on Friday anyway. So Councillor O'Keefe, in terms of do you agree that there's a need to simplify local government? It is a loaded question based on the reform documentation that you've read.
Disagree.
Spicy.
This question, sorry,
It's a bit like asking, do you agree that you should stop beating up your family at home?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like,
So just to reiterate, I didn't design the questions that the government is asking. So spicy example. But this is the crux of the conversation. So in terms of what you heard earlier on about significant government reforms, local water done well, taking 40% of the existing work, regional council functions versus local council functions. So the question is anchored around basically the role of regional council and Buller District Council around, is it too complicated having, because at the moment, the proposal on stage one is merely to change the governance of regional council and to look at the potential for unitary councils. We need to be careful in our wording. A unitary council is different from council amalgamations. So unitary council is there is no regional and you have 3 unitary councils on the coast. Amalgamating and unitary councils is a different conversation. So in terms of this, we would look at this question and say, is there a need to simplify local government from regional and district council based on what you understand of the reform underway? Oh, so I've got to disagree. Yep. No, sweet as. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. And so I disagree.
Oh,
I disagree.
yeah, Russell.
Agree.
Agree. Councillor Rutherford.
absolutely agree, and that was one of my conviction platforms. I believe that Wallace should be doing everything it can to push to become unitary.
So you strongly agree?
But strongly.
Cool.
I strongly agree. Should be, we simplify local government. But that is clarifying, government district experience, not a TTPP incorporating disparate societies on our own water rather than local water done well, it's not going to be local, so everybody has to be done well. A unitary council, absolutely. So the functions of the district council were incorporated locally when they were devolved to the regional council. They lost sight of this. Of course, the lot of the energy and of course, the reputation of capital when it's more. When it was poorly administered, Graham asked the regional council.
So strongly agree in terms of we need to simplify.
And to simplify, simplifying is no TTPP, our own district, yeah. We are disparate societies, we need to have our own separate rules, our own separate controls. That would simplify things and make it cheap.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson.
I agree. I'm not sure as whether I'm going to the extent to strongly agree, but I certainly agree and bordering on strongly agree.
Thank you kindly. Councillor Barry.
I agree, but I have concerns that we will be bullied and somebody else's form of unity council and we clean up local water as well. So
Yeah.
yes, I agree. And then there's fibre under our own
Terms.
terms.
Cool. Thank you.
Right, my answer's a little more complicated.
Oh, here we go.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the people asking this question. I think it's coming from an ideological framework. When these so-called reforms were announced, you might remember, and I can't remember which minister it was, whether it was the Prime Minister or someone else said, local government in New Zealand has lost its social license. Remember that quote? Right. So this is coming from an ideological point of view. I don't think that local government has lost its social license. And when they ask this question, simplify local government, simplify is a euphemism for weaken. What they're really saying is, do we agree that there is a need to weaken local government? We need to strengthen local government. But short answer, yes. I agree that there should be a unitary council for Buller, and I'm very interested in what Councillor Hawes is saying. But I would suggest that being a unitary council for Buller gives us better options, and it may well be that we return to our association with the other councils in the top of the south, which are already unitary councils and have been for a long, long time. In Tasman, Nelson, Marlborough, we would be becoming just part of the top of the south trend, really. Return to the old Seven Shield mentality.
Thank you, councillor. So that's an agreement.
But with that caveat,
Understood.
you know, let's
Understood.
be aware of where that question is coming from.
Understood. Completely understood.
I strongly agree. But the provision is that, you know, Buller District, has a caveat that make the government, local government represent the needs and requirements of the Buller community. You know, you don't undermine our sovereign rights to get things done for them.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. So there was, just to sum up, 2 disagreed with the need to simplify local government, 4 agree, 3 strongly agree with this. Councillor Hawes.
My point being exactly what Ray moved into. I believe this, and I said that, it's a leading question. They want to take it a different route. By you agreeing to it, you're saying that we're going to the gallows. So that's all, that's right.
Sorry, I'll just jump in for 2 seconds. So we will note, and we will get back to this as well. So the notes that we have taken have been extensive. We're not just going to answer this with a text box. We will take your commentary, your feedback, your concerns, and as we answer these, we will add our own format into the submission as well. So we'll answer the questions with caveats attached. That is how we'll do our subject. Yeah. So the functions of regional and local council are too complicated at the moment, and simplifying them by unitary.
Because I think question 2 is the most difficult question in the,
Which we're about to get.
and that's why we're doing it fast. Because we know that that's going to be filled with so many opinions that need to make sure.
Now, sorry,
So vague.
Yeah.
That could be anyone could fit that, agree with what Ray's saying.
Understood.
Agree, if there was if you had worded that question,
Mhm.
do you agree on the unitary council or something of that would still retain our, everyone, the Westland, Grey, and Buller retain the council IDPs,
Mhm.
right? Remove our own districts. I would be way from a different to and agreement.
So if it's okay with councillors, by Friday, we're not going to put a tick box in. Every submission we have read is done in its own unique way. And we're well allowed to put a submission and upload it in our own way. So if we have listened extensively, I hear you loud and clear. We will author it and write it and send it out on Friday, and we'll see if we've hit the high notes for the table. If that works. Cool. This next one is essentially the crux of the question. So government is looking to introduce legislation apparently sometime early or mid next year that looks at dissolving the roles of our regional councillors. So that is step one. They want to replace our regional councillors with a combined territories board. So that is a mayor from each district to take over the roles and functions of 2 regional councillors. That is the proposal as it stands. So rather than just working our way through this, I think it's really important to think that there is a sliding scale of options here. So a option that has been put forward in the consultation document is to say no regional councillors, we replace them with a mayor. So 3 mayors will take over the role of the regional councillors. At the other end of the spectrum, you have keep it as is while we figure out the regional reorganisational plan. So keep the governance table there with 2 councillors from Buller, etc., etc. In between that, there are also a series of options. So I think it's worth considering some of those options in terms of what would work the best for Buller. So this legislation will likely be passed. Now, what would work for the Buller district while we're spending 2 to 3 years figuring out what the future of local government looks like in terms of the representation of regional council functions and creating a regional reorganisational plan. So those are the functions that the 2 regional councillors won't be there to do under current legislation. As staff, we've been kicking different ideas around. So we've sort of been saying, well, what if rather than the mayor, we had the mayor and the deputy and a regional councillor? It seems to be dead smack in the middle of what the government's saying and what other submissions around the country are saying about no changes to regional council. How does the table actually feel about no regional councillors? So Councillor Cole, Councillor McIntyre essentially lose their jobs mid next year and get replaced with Mayor Russell, Mayor Lash and Mayor Gibson. That is who would be leading all of the regional council decisions and spending 2 years coming up with a regional reorganisation plan. Are there strong feelings in terms of how do we feel about no regional councillors? Are there any strong opinions around the table or alternative models to consider?
Oh, I haven't got alternatives,
That's fine.
but I don't think the regional council's been particularly useful, to be honest, in the past. I think we would be better represented with people that are directly accountable to the district council. And, you know, they've said the mayor, you know, we could probably give them a bit of support there and have more than just the mayor, I would suggest, on the council with this new thing. So my vote would be yes for the mayor sitting on it, no for the Crown Commissioners having voting rights.
Get to the commissioners, it shouldn't, sir.
And also, I think we should probably strengthen the mayor's position with other support staff.
So just to sum up, you would think that with the transition, you're essentially saying that you don't like the, you do support the idea of not having 2 regional councillors and replacing the functions of those 2 regional councillors with the mayor plus.
Yes.
And we'll get to the plus.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So just directly answering the first question, I'd like to see a new category, another bullet point there. Vehemently disagree, and that would summarise my approach to this. I think it's the wackiest thing I've ever heard of, quite frankly. So what we're proposing is to just change the governance structure for the regional council, but the operations will also be there.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt. A regional reorganisational plan will take 2 years to figure out what the future of local government look like. It might be unitary, it might be amalgamated, it might be nothing, who knows?
I understand, I'll get into that.
Just
I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
So yes, we're going to take a 2-year period to review things. But why are we making this change to the governance structure of regional councils right across New Zealand? I'm not just talking about the West Coast. It is wacky. Last October, nearly 3 months ago, we all of New Zealanders, unless they lived in Tasman, Marlborough and Nelson, and maybe Auckland, elected people to run their regional council. They elected those people democratically. The regional councils will still be there for the 2 years, next 2 years at least. Why is the government taking away that democracy and accountability? It does not make sense. Yes, the future role of regional councils. Why on earth are we imposing this wacky government structure on them? There's no connection. It doesn't make sense. It's impossible. I'm not saying it's something. You're saying definitely different process. Some people will get everything that value to the rise and touch the regional council, we're not going to pay them and look at them on a regional realisation.
It's bizarre, like we have such a large region, how, that we suddenly expect our mayors to take over the governance of our regional council, and we've got so much other stuff on the table right now, like local water done well. There is so much on our table right now. And for our district, there's so much more. I mean, even if we look at, you know, some of the stuff that's happening with the coal industry and, you know, changes that might be happening in the next 3 years, our mayors need to have their head in the game for this council. So I strongly disagree. And actually, if we were going to do it, we could keep our regional councillors and they could work with our mayors, and I don't have an issue. Oh, well, we're not talking about commissions, but I don't have an issue with an independent commissioner if it's a non-biased voice, and you know, that's me.
Cool. I will try and get to the commissioner part because that's also a little spicy. Normally talking about commissioners and veto powers. So sum up, same as Councillor Cunro, keep the 2 regional councillors. Work. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I normally call you Ray. It's easier. Ray's easier. So the same as Ray was to go keep the 2. Work with the governing bodies as they stand, come up with a regional reorganisation plan over 2 years. Thank you kindly.
That's right.
Ditto. Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Councillor Reynolds.
Look, I can't read that screen up there, and I thought we'd resolved before that when we have this sort of presentation, we have it emailed to us, so we can put it on our screen in front of us.
Here you go. Here you go.
You've got it there.
So here, if you've got the machine.
So these are the
just one aspect of the, it's concerning that someone could suggest that the 3 mayors replace the councillors. Who is the wacko that suggested that? And I'd suggest you'll never find out who, but somebody started this off.
Yeah.
But we'll never, like all these changes, we'll never find them. The functions of regional councils used to be within the county councils.
Yeah.
Someone had reform and changed it. And when it didn't work, they left it that way for many, many years. Why do we keep changing things that work?
Yeah.
It's because we've got people sitting in a bureaucracy somewhere in Wellington that has a reform, makes a change and inflicts it on us. And this is just another example of that.
Yeah.
As another clear example, the number of staff in regional council would give, on a proportionate basis, 30 staff to this council, 30. Okay. Recently, an example across the road from me on the Irrawaddy West.
Sorry, Councillor Reynolds. With all due respect, at the moment was about the governance of regional council. So the question, and I hear you loud and clear in terms of the reform, but in terms of that question of do we replace 2 councillors with a mayor is kind of what we're looking at for this segment.
It's certainly against.
Against, so keep it the same as the members at the table. Yep.
That's right.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to be rude.
Okay, strongly disagree on the same basis that we've heard already. I think we should retain our elected officials on the regional council But a strong mandate should be given to them, in terms of accelerating reform, local government reform. I don't know why it's 2 years, bugger if I do. Leave the guys there, give them a year to sort it out, follow a unitary authority within a year's time. Leave these guys there in the interim.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you want to sum up?
Sorry?
You want to sum up from Phil?
No, Phil, you're following the same line, keep the regional councils, but the emphasis on could we hurry up in terms of looking at the regional reorganisation plan rather than taking 2 years, try and do it faster. Understood.
Right. Strongly disagree. Okay, picking up on what Phil said. If we're going down the line of a unitary council for Buller, okay, then there's no point in leaving the councillors in place of West Coast Regional Council to sort out how they're going to make it happen for Buller, for Grey, for Westland, or for Grey and Westland. Okay, my view is you need to put a commissioner in there who is actually going to work with the 3 councils or the 2 councils, but certainly with Buller on sorting out how we actually do what we need to do or would need to do as a unitary council. I don't believe that the way it's structured at the moment would enable us to get to that point quickly, if at all.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Hawes?
Yes, I like exactly what I just heard there. I think that if we are going to move to a unitary council, separate unitary councils, then there will only be resistance. I think the point of the whole thing is that they want to remove resistance to force change and therefore moving to a commissioner and change into unitary councils would be the way to go. But I just want to say that let's be honest about this. This isn't about the West Coast. This is about regional councils elsewhere. This is about getting other regional councils to combine with the changes to the Resource Management Act to try and enable massive change across districts that people don't agree with. This is about taking away people's ability to determine their own words.
Yeah.
This is all this is about. If this government could leave the West Coast Regional Council in place, they would. There would be no reason to remove them. They're doing exactly what they want to do. The reason why we've got some issues with regional council is because they're not doing what other people in the region want. They've just following their own basic agenda, which hasn't included all. And that was the argument that we heard around the table. So they just ignored us. Right? So the reality is this isn't about the East Coast. This is about enabling change to gut any controls in resource management. So my view basically is that in terms of West Coast Regional Council, everybody got rid of. Well, as a person that was part of the so-called democratic process of regional council, I don't have any faith that they follow democracy. So I think they should be gone. I say put a commissioner in there and they change, move to unitary councils.
So just to be clear, over the next 2 years of the process, once the legislation comes in, the conversation about amalgamation and unitaries, etc., unless there's a strong push to go for it. But in terms of what the government wants to understand is the governance. So Councillor Hawes, are you saying that? So the question around, should we take our 2 elected officials at West Coast Regional Council and replace them with the mayor for now, or an alternate?
Yeah. Operate as a commissioner, get rid of them. They will change, do it on a one-on-one basis.
Noted. Thank you.
So what powers is this commissioner that we're talking about got? And it's not an elected appointment, is it?
No, 2 seconds.
We're clearly entering into discussion phase where people are making recommendations on unitaries, this and that. So you've been non-specific about, the regional council and the setup that we're going to, and that's why we're going all over the place.
No, it's useful to understand. I understand people by default want to talk about the end result. I'm trying to bring it back to the conversation at the moment, which we started off in terms of we have two regional councillors. Yeah, so we've,
Point of order, point of order. Everyone's got to.
I was going to the general conversation where you say, you open it up with, oh, if you vote for this, then you're voting to go to the gallows. That clearly,
I think
scaremongering and paranoia.
naturally this, and we spoke about this before the workshop, I spoke to Shane about this morning. Naturally, we're always going to go to what the future looks like. It's just a part of what you guys are elected to do. You should be focusing on the future. What Paul and we're trying to do just now is actually, we're looking at one question. Do we agree that replacing the regional councillor with a board is the way forward? But it's important that we get people's voice so that we can put this submission together. And as the conversation, as the conversation moves on, we'll get that. I mean, there's going to be more questions at the end of it and the main question at the end is, do you agree with it? Then we can actually, that's probably when most of the discussion will come in.
Councillor O'Keefe, in terms of the roles of our regional councillors.
I tend to agree with Ray. I'm all for super local.
Or what was it, Tony? I didn't pick that up.
I agree with what, I haven't really got any more to add. Everyone said their bit and I'm pretty much, I can connect all that. And I agree with what Ray said, essentially.
So the majority in the room, and we will note that this isn't a unanimous opinion by any extent, is to say that we largely feel that retaining the two regional councillors for now and working strongly with this governance table over the next 2 years to look at the regional reorganisational plan.
But you would need to note that that's not a unanimous view.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I think every question is going to come with that. It's important to get 10, 11 people thinking the same. Yeah, and it's important to know everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, and this is the start of this conversation. So this will happen many times over the following couple of years. So we've already kind of gone into what we dislike and what we don't like about the CTBs. There was a lot of conversation about obviously the democratic process we've been under, that we do have two regional councillors who are voted on accordingly to represent those interests. So I think we've probably captured enough, just conscious of time, to be able to make a draft of this and issue this out. The commissioner conversation is the next one. So there's a few people that have looked at that question already in terms of the role of commissioners. So at the moment, we sort of say that the state, maybe that we wish to say, keep those regional councils. Is there a role for a commissioner to work alongside the councils looking ahead at the regional reorganisational plan? And should that commissioner have weight? So it's a really important conversation, right? Because you go, this is going to be 4 councils essentially working together to try and iron out details of what the best for each of their areas and districts is, and then collectively seeing if there's something to work with there. So the government is asking and saying, should we put a commissioner in? What are your thoughts on a commissioner? Do you want one or not? And should that commissioner have anything from the majority vote, veto powers, or non-vote? Commissioners, to me, I get an allergic reaction, but there's the other side of the equation too, where a commissioner is normally, somebody with a required set of skills that would be able to work in those areas as well. So my initial reaction was always, ugh, but is it? So quite keen to hear your voices quickly on the role of a commissioner. Do you think there should be one? And looking at the regional reorganisation plan, and should they have clout? Councillor O'Keefe.
I see where there could be some merit in having them as non-voting. Take the pressure and workload off. That would be the only advantage, as long as it's the directive from the buller. Yeah.
Understood.
One thing to add, just as we're thinking about that question is, say there's 3 mayors on this board, and you've maybe got 2 mayors that agree to one thing, and you've got 1 mayor that doesn't. Remember what the commissioner's position actually is, that they might be able to go, based on efficiency, based on blah, 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 we're actually going to take if they had the voting power, they might be able to overrule based on what works for everyone. So it might be, it could be helpful. That's what I'm trying to say. Just keep that in the back of your mind.
So non-voting commissioner, understood. Councillor Hawes?
Definitely, I think there needs to be a commissioner. I think it's, absolutely critical. I don't think you're gonna get some good decision making if you don't think the commissioner. And I read paper and I read the comments in the last, 15 paper just recently. I don't think they can function without having a commissioner up there, so, and I think the commissioner should actually have a serious voting powers.
Thank you, sir.
I agree with everything Dave just said, make it easy. I think, what I'll add one thing, is that having a commissioner come in, and picking up on a point you made earlier on, that commissioner will bring, competencies maybe to the table, that may not exist or may complement.
Thank you. Councillor Rabbit.
Yeah, definitely, at least one commissioner with some type of veto or voting, I'm not sure exactly. Concern that I would have if it's left entirely to the regional council to develop a regional organisational plan. There's no mandate there for them to represent our views in this. And that would really concern me. They might come up with a reorganisation, regional organisation that just sees the status quo. And that would not, in my view, be necessarily, expressing the views of this table. It may, but it may not either. So I would be concerned that if it was just left to the current structure to carry out that reorganisation. I don't know where our voice fits in, and that would be a huge concern.
So what I think I heard before, and I'm quite keen to test, is not that the position was to take the three regional councils and replace, to leave them there, but that they will not do the regional reorganisation plan. We would do it with them. So it's not leaving them to do the reorganisational plan, but it's leaving them as their governance functions at regional council and to be working alongside this table as well. That was my understanding of the conversation earlier. Yeah.
That's fine, I agree.
Okay. Yeah.
It does sort of, what you're saying is, sort of covered in a further next question.
Yeah.
So we're sort of getting a wee bit preemptive with this particular one.
Yeah. Councillor Reynolds.
I agree that a commissioner should be called in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I've had dealings with the regional council and I find them to be inept. And I say inept because they couldn't answer their mail 4 years ago, and it's been consistent ever since. And you can't answer your mail in your local authority, you're inept. They've got some pretty serious tasks before them at the moment.
Mhm.
And from my dealings with them, they're not dealing with them according to the law. And I'd like to see a commissioner brought in as an interim step into devolving their functions into unitary councils
With voting power. With voting power.
with voting power.
Understood. Thank you. Councillor Sampson.
The commissioner was, no voting power.
Thank you.
And the cost was.
I think, to be honest, that's something I'm just going to write into that submission, is that the cost is prohibitive of these reforms. Yeah, I think that's, to be honest, I think that's a given. We will write that into the submission that we'll give to you on Friday.
Just, or you might have been just saying something, as someone pick me up on this if I'm wrong, but in a conversation that we had with DIA, the cost of these reforms was going to come out of West Coast Regional Council's budgets. Is that correct?
That was what we heard from
Yeah, so in other words, the ratepayer is going to pay for it one way or another.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any central funding coming.
No.
But in this submission process, we're allowed to state our case. And this is one of the things that does make us unique. We've got a tiny ratepayer base. We're not Auckland. We're not Christchurch.
I just thought I'd point that out, Paul, in case you weren't aware of that, but
I wasn't.
the government expects us to pick up the tab.
Understood. Thank you. Councillor Sampson.
Just on the cost point of view, if you can put the sort of comparison possibly, just like you said, against Christchurch or Auckland, the percentage of rates, what
Yeah.
1% in either but of those to what it is within the village.
Yeah, I think it's a
That's sort of
valid,
Quite
Yeah.
mind,
100%. I think it's a valid point, to go, look, commissioners are expensive. This work program has a budget associated and everybody has to do the same work. But smaller regions are gonna have a harder time to pay for it.
Yeah, but it's just,
Totally
just
agree.
for clarity, I mean, for your water services specialist, $1,600 a day. That's how much the cost, and that's for one thing. And a couple of
Just
councils.
conscious on as well. Councillor Barry?
I think Commissioner, definitely.
Mhm.
I think that though bringing in a commissioner and considering the cost, then we then have to consider the timeline around change. I think that's, if we're having a commissioner, we need to consider the timeline. When we're talking about retaining regional councillors, in my mind, their role is governing the regional council through that period. They may chat to our mayors and our commissioner, but actually they don't have a voice as such. They, you know, I see their role as continuing on to do what they were voted in to do, and they may advise our team, but I think that it's our mayors and our commissioner that
With voting power or not?
I think with voting power, yeah, because you're right, John, I immediately think 3 mayors and, for me, it's like,
It could be.
Not a good number.
Yeah, well, just a reminder that this question relates to the regional councils across the whole of New Zealand. So we've got to be careful that we're not specific to West Coast. So yeah, my caveat is I think the concept of the CTB is wacky, but if we have to have it, and I hope we don't, then I'm all for a commissioner to be involved with the majority vote.
Understood.
Can I just add, Ray, is that the West Coast Regional Council don't see themselves going.
Sure they can't.
And
Totally understand that.
government, have made it quite clear, and on calls that I've been on as well. I think because of what they think and what they're working on, that you need to have a commissioner come in to deal with some issues that Paul mentioned, but also to get the whole thing on track and make it happen.
Cool.
Thank you. A point of difference is that I looked at the Crown Commissioner, you give them a majority vote or ascribing more veto power. You're basically giving the right to the Crown to set the conditions. That's what it is. It's a Crown appointed commissioner. And if you give them more power, you're approaching statutory management for your regional council. That's what we're talking about here. And that comes at a cost. And that cost, I believe, is prohibitive. Because what we're going to see is escalating costs with the regional council and all the transition if we have this high-priced, Crown-appointed commissioner coming in with power.
Mhm.
I think our mayors should be up to it. That's what I think. And I think we should have, in the transition, the regional councils assist that transition and provide the support. So I don't think we should have a commissioner. I think it's going to be additional burden on the ratepayer, and I think it will be unacceptable in terms of the rate rise and in terms of the representation of elected officials. You're going to give it to a Crown appointment. The Crown, therefore, by default, has more power than they had before. And what I heard before was everybody saying, no, we want to have power ourselves. So it just seems to me a little bit contrary if you want to cede that power to a commissioner, if you want to give them that much power. So I would be in favour of the mayors, but you know, if the general opinion is not that from the council, then I would accept a Crown Commissioner at a lower level of authority. Because I think giving it to the Crown Commissioners will cede a lot of our sovereign rights to regional governments, to the Crown.
I'd like another bite at the cherry after listening to Dave. most of the time, I believe that there would be a consensus, you know, in this very, very imperfect structure that's been proposed. Most of the time, I would expect that our three mayors would achieve a consensus. But the question is what happens when they can't, when they don't have consensus. We don't want to be in a situation where we're just outvoted 2-1 and then stuck.
Mhm.
It's got to be a more democratic process. That is not a democratic process because we have no sense of identity. We've lost our position. So that's where I'm coming from when I talk about the role of the commission.
Understood, sir. Yeah.
I agree with Ray, and that's why I would agree with the fact of having the regional councillors or whatever they are, in whatever form, assist the mayors and add to that vote. So they have a vote. I'd rather see a regional councillor appointed having a vote on this, and that would break the stalemate rather than a Crown Commissioner.
Sorry, Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, I don't see this as anything to do with democracy or government taking over. You know, I mean, if you want to go back, I just go, I could be a conspiracy theorist and we could be spreading into more conspiracy theory with the government takeover, but I don't see it that way. I see this as change and I see the need for a change agent. And I don't see existing people in a role as being those change agents. I do think that we need to strongly advocate that central government should be funding this commissioner on behalf of this change. But I think we should be stressing that the need for a clear change agent is the reason for it.
John, I reckon we can actually author something that will pick up on this quite well. Councillor Reynolds.
There was just one other point I was going to make before Dave mentioned a statutory manager. Well, if we look at management, we're getting away from the real advantage that's required in the organisation of the functions of regional council, and that is eyes on the ground. When regional council was formed, we end up with 2 representatives from this area, 2 from each area, and there weren't enough eyes on the ground. Those 2 were lost amongst others to report the problems of this district to regional. If we get a unitary council, then hopefully our Karamea rep will tell us about the problems with the Karamea River. Then council halls will tell us when the Ngangahara River's likely to reach the reach and dump again. And so you've got more eyes on the ground with a unitary council. So when I said I was in support of, it's a statutory manager I see as being preferable as an interim stage to devolving the functions into districts.
Right. I agree. That term we're talking about, I just heard Paul say interim. That interim appointment wasn't up there. Are we talking about interim or are we talking about full time?
Transition, 2 years.
Transition.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So over that 2-year transition from when the legislation's passed. Right. Voting power. This is actually a really easy one. This is made for major urban centres buddying up with little rural areas. So there's proportional voting, et cetera, et cetera. The other coast councils have taken a position, 1 seat, 1 vote. Because our population centres, quite frankly, are very, very close in terms of scale and size. So whatever the composition of the CTB, that we don't need to have the conversation about proportional voting, et cetera. It really is designed for tier 1 and 2 urban environments. If the table is comfortable, we can just author something similar to that in terms of a submission to go, you know, we have similar population densities and centres and in a democratic process, 1 seat, 1 voice. Is the table happy enough with that? Cool. I just figured this was the easy one because, Greymouth to Westport's a little different, but not huge. Right, the 2-year transition. So as discussed, the role of the CTB is not just picking up the functions of regional council, it is creating that regional reorganisational plan. So that is the point of it. So I guess this should be reasonably easy because we have traversed a bunch of these subjects already. So the CTB, in whatever format that it ends up being, Do you support the proposal to require them to do a regional reorganisational plan? It's a little bit of a self-evident question because we have had a lot of discussion about reorganisation here in terms of unitary and amalgamations. There does seem to be a strong push around the table to say, yes, we want a regional reorganisational plan. I don't think you can skip past this stage and just implement a final solution. I think that is the point in doing a plan, is to implement that solution. So the question stands, do you support that the CTB, the Transitional Territorial Board, is going to create a regional reorganisational plan? Cool. Councillor Hinkson? Yeah, sure, Jen.
Well, somebody has to. You know, so somebody has to, CTBs or whatever, whoever we put in there, have to develop a regional reorganisation.
Strongly agree.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an awkward and complicated issue because really what we want is for each district to be in charge of its own destiny. And we could easily find ourselves outvoted in the CTB 2-1. It's pretty obvious that Westland and Grey have more in common with each other than either of them has with Buller. And I just see it as a very imperfect way of progressing this really significant restructuring of local government in New Zealand. So I kind of neither agree nor disagree because I think the whole concept of CTBs being the driving force in this massive change is a pretty naked concept, really.
Can I just ask a question here? You've got develop reorganisational plans. That's not approving the plans.
So this
Ray made a point saying that we'll be outvoted 2-1. This is just developing the regional plans. How we then go about approving them might be a matter of widespread elections or further debate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think we need to think over the next 2 years, how are we having these conversations with our communities? It's all good for us to be able to sit around these tables, but this is a conversation that everybody needs to be a part of. So even the engagement and consultation required over time, to me, is still part of the equation of who pays. You know, it's a really big conversation to take further out. I think from my understanding in terms of legislation, there will be a requirement for community consultation on the way through. So it's not a nice to have, it as a core component of this in terms of making those decisions over time. Councillor Berry.
I find this bizarre because you've just talked about engagement and communication. So what is the organisational support needed behind a CTB? And who's paying for it? Like, they're our mayors. So do our mayors have the skill to develop these reorganisational plans? What is their support from staff? Which staff? What capacity do we have to provide that support? This whole question, so it's bizarre to me. I don't even want to answer it because it's a bizarre question. I don't know what is required in developing that plan and what support we need. We're saying our commissioner might be a cost, but also staff time. If we need staff time, is a cost because we can't go down this pathway without engaging our communities in this process. And
So at a staff level, we agree. We're looking at a workload in front of us as well, and who authors the regional reorganisation plans and what support mechanisms are required for that. That might be commentary to run alongside in terms of the submission also.
For me, it is commentary. And so I kind of, I'm with Ray here because I don't want to commit to this because I don't understand the other support and the other costs that are behind it and actually whether we have the capacity to support.
Well,
CTB.
can I just jump in there before you, Dave? Sorry, I was trying to get attention. And I don't think we should take CTBs literally, that you're going to have 3 mayors sitting in a room trying to figure all of this out. I mean, you're not getting it with, local water done well. Of course, the mayors will lead it, but it's going to require resources CEs and staff to be able to pull that together. Now I pick up on Dave Hinkston's focus on develop. That's what it's all about. Now, I can't tell you here that the Westland Mayor is not thinking the same way that is around this table, a unitary council for Westland. But what I have picked up is that if each of us goes in banging our own drum and it's not seen to be working together to improve local government, then, you know, you're asking the government to come in and tell us what's going to happen. So we can work together, but we can have different ideas about what we want to come out of it.
Can I just, as it was like, I hear you and I understand that, but what expertise, you can work together, but what expertise do you require? And what is your understanding of actually what the regional council does right now? It's this whole thing is a little bit bizarre to me, because where does the support come from? Regional council who are currently doing the work, who probably don't want this to happen? Does it come from our staff who are currently?
That's why you need a
overworked?
commissioner.
But if we're paying a commissioner to do that, Chris, then our price goes up again. It's like, it's this whole thing, the cost of it to me is just, it's the process, this process is going to be expensive, and I would like to have some understanding around the cost.
But to be clear, we're not required to have to answer every question, right? The debate is the really important part in terms of what we'll put in our submission. We don't verbatim have to follow step 1 through to 10 in terms of this. So if this is rather than going, hey, this is how we rank these, a step back to go, we have serious and sincere concerns around this. That's perfectly fine as well. So that's other submissions that we've read have answered them, but in their own way. So yeah.
Just to put your mind at rest, before we deliver the budget for the annual plan in a couple of weeks, we haven't budgeted anything for this. There is nothing in our budget for this.
So look, have we put the questions in the wrong order? That's what I'm just sort of wanting to ask you before we go into, because what we're hearing now is we've already made a decision around commissioner alongside councillors. Were we better off saying, right, mayor, and our instruction to the mayor is unitary council? You know, I mean, clear and concise, you go away there and you come back, you haven't agreed unitary council, we're going to shoot you. So, you know, I mean, is that not the, you know, like if we'd have put them the other way around, we would have come out with a different answer. So yeah, I just want to raise.
Yeah, no, understood, councillor. It's a bit of a tricky one in terms of this is the way that they unfolded that consultation document. So this is the process that they undertook in terms of chapter by chapter in the document. So this isn't us once again coming up with these questions. I do understand that. I think in terms of we are going to have to work with the other coast councils and figuring out how do we do regional reorganisational plans. That is something that the government is going to highly likely put through in terms of legislation. So I sincerely don't know if we can just sidestep the process. We can certainly provide advice in the early days to the government to go, hey, this is our worldview on the reform, which is the point in today, obviously. But yeah, I think for me, listening to this, I'm starting to get clearer in terms of what the table is thinking around all of this as well. So we can write that into the submission for your approval over the next week and a half. Yeah. Absolutely, perfectly understood. Yeah.
I don't think the people who wrote this are interested in our views as to how local government will be better organised in our area. Otherwise, we wouldn't get some of these absurd questions. If we just had one question, what does Buller District Council, how do they see an improvement to the reorganisation of local government in the area? We could all sit down together and think about the way we may do that, rather than just answer some pointed, steered questions, which actually avoid us actually uniting and coming up with a plan that works for our area. Because the person who wrote that will live in a society that's nothing like the communities we live in. And they don't understand us. And we could come up with a far better plan, sitting down saying, this is how we should organise local government in our area. Unitary councils or whatever. So that's my thinking on it.
Perfect. So in terms of a submission paper that John and I will have a good crack at, because you did spend the first hour, obviously the unique positions and points. And I think this is the power in letting the conversation sometimes flow a little bit. Everybody has put a foot forward. We don't have to answer this verbatim. So we can easily skip over the CTB questions around agreeing or disagreeing. I do think it's probably worth just quickly having a look at the criteria that have been created that they want to, in the future, assess the reorganisation plans. So whether the reorganisation plans are done with status quo, we keep all the councils as is, but we want to work, on figuring that out. They want to have a criteria that they want to have a look at and assess through. We can choose as a table, obviously, to say, well, we'll design our own criteria. Once again, I do understand that this is done at a national level. And in terms of asking for the opinions of district councils in small areas like that, that is the point in consultation. I hope that we can get our unique messages and points across, that we're not tier 1 and 2 urban environments, and that we're crafting our own pathway, essentially, in this. So the criteria, this is,
I didn't get an opportunity to respond to the last question. I disagree, and I find it quite bizarre that it should even be proposed that the what we now call the regional council, whatever they are given the role and responsibility for developing a regional organisational plan. The last time we went through this, and you alluded to it at the start of this workshop, was driven by the Local Government Commission. We didn't all agree with the outcome of that, but at that point in time, the government considered it important enough to look at the governance structure on the West Coast and bring in the Local Government Commission to oversee how that should be delivered. Personally, I've already said I didn't agree with the outcome, but I think they would be far less biased in terms of working with all our communities and coming up with something that our communities could, live with. I don't know why the government isn't just doing exactly that across there. They want to reorganise. They've got a local government commission already functioning. They might have to throw a few more resources at it, but I believe they should be coming down and talking to us, and it should not be done by our current regional council.
Well, I don't think the regional council, it's the mayors, and we're talking about putting a commissioner in, not the regional council being involved in developing a plan going forward. Is that correct?
It is, yes. So the CTB or the territorial board is what does that function. So it's not the regional council authoring this. It's essentially the government is saying at the moment, it's your 3 mayors and a commissioner that will do that work.
And my concern is, from what I've heard, is that if the 3 councils on the West Coast anyway are not seen to be talking and, call it develop, talking, engaging, et cetera, then somebody's going to say, well, these guys can't work it out amongst themselves. We'll have to work it out for them.
And the far north councils have done exactly what you just proposed. So they got together with the 4 councils, the regional and the 3 districts, and skipped through all of this and went straight to the Local Government Commission. There's a newspaper article there 2 days ago.
Was that where
Well, I don't know. The article was 2 days old, but they were going to do that and invite the minister for a conversation around that. Yeah. So is that something that's worth debating? It's going straight to local government commissions, skipping the process of a regional reorganisational plan.
You're asking me.
Danger, health and safety.
It's on your shoulders, Phil.
Yeah.
That has been spoken about. I think Paul's right. I mean, a few people have said that around the tables. We should just be getting on with stuff.
Yeah, I have a concern around doing that. I think that then just completely cuts us out of the conversation. And I don't think, I know that you talk about TTPP being a process, but a process that started at 1.5 mil or something and ends up at 8 mil, a process that we didn't need, that we were forced into going through,
you've said it all before. That was what they took us down by going that route. So no, I think that, sticking to somewhere we've got input, and I would like to think that, Chris, the mayor would engage with all of us guys so that at least our voices are generically being part of the conversation.
I certainly don't want to be shocked, Dave, that's for sure.
Leave you on your own if you want.
Very,
Do you want to talk first?
So my opinion is I'm not gonna agree or strongly disagree, because I'm just really sick of the government coming up with these open-ended, vague, weird questions for us to give them words on that they can manipulate. Sorry if I'm not going down the rabbit hole, but I've seen this time and time again. They're very crafty, and I just get to the actual point. You know, stop with these weird questions. Just call a spade, and we can just say yes or no, or yeah. It's just too vague for me to be giving a response to. Yeah. Excuse me.
sorry, Councillor Derry.
If to go down this pathway, like this is, if we want to do this, we agree that something needs to be done. We've kind of all have said that. I honestly do think that we need to look at the big picture of the West Coast, and that our Economic Development Agency comes into it as well. And so, you know, we will have to work in it. The other things that happen. So really it's going to be about regional tax. So we're talking about citizens. The government wants to make possibility barriers about that. It's understood. You know, we're a small parcel, we need greater efficiencies. We all understand that. We have a lot on our plate right now. If you want us to do it properly, give us some funding to allow us to do that. Because the desire is there to do it. This is not the right way to do it. These are the wrong questions they're asking us. It's, you know, like, it's not that we don't agree with it, we do, but actually it is bigger than just regional council. So I kind of feel like I'm not happy.
The question is then, do we actually want to answer these questions?
Which is fine. I was going to say the same. So as we said earlier, the original intention was we'll do the opening salvo about what makes us unique. From the conversations we've had today, and that's 2 hours of really, really good conversation. We have a lot of content to be able to author our own submission on our own terms. That's fine, right? We don't have to answer every one of these questions verbatim. So I think, personally, we've got enough content in terms of being able to respond really eloquently to this and state Buller's position. If you give us 2 days, by Friday, both of us have got our diaries completely blanked out all day. We've obviously got a recording of this and the notes we've taken ourselves. And by the end of Friday, we can get a draft to you. I think we could sum this up incredibly well in terms of what we've heard, because there's some really good positions here.
He's got his finger on the button, but
On your behalf.
sorry, with that and, somebody else first.
Sorry, Councillor Sampson.
So there are a number of councils that have got submissions in already.
Yeah.
So what sort of format have they used? Have they just disregarded all those questions?
No, it's all over the shop, to be honest. Everybody's done something slightly different. Yeah.
So there's actually no clear pathway.
Some people have just done the 10 questions or whatever it is and not given any background, not given any uniqueness, but there are people that's doing this proposal.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's these, I think when the government puts these submission processes out, they're not always specifically made for districts to respond to, right? This wasn't the government going, hey, district councils tell us. This is the government saying, hey, New Zealand, here's the questions we want a response to. We can author our own. And the examples we've seen, some of them, stick exactly to script. But a good chunk of them haven't answered a single one of these. I think today, to stimulate debate, the questions certainly have worked. But I think the messaging I'm getting through is we're not comfortable in responding verbatim as per this, and there is a unique position for Buller to put forward.
Can I just say, you know, you said there are other factors to be considered, and, you know, I've been having a look at the documentation, obviously. And, you know, I find it odd that, you know, to support the regional reorganisation, the government is going to review all the functions of, you know, and they're going to do that before these CBTs are established. Well, hell, so we don't even know. The government is clearly saying that they're going to make some decisions around roles and functions anyway. They're going to do that. They say it in this paper.
Realistically, we've got an election coming up and the runway's only so long. You know, and I don't think some of these things, you know, are going to get the traction to get over the line. I mean, they are going to take time.
Can I just, you seem to be a bit surprised.
No.
To support this, a government review of regional council roles and functions will provide clarity on which responsibilities remain local and which may be either centralised or discontinued. This review will be completed before the CTBs are established, and CTBs will need to take into account the outcomes of this review when developing their plans. Well, so we're flipping around in the dark. The government are going to make some decisions that clearly are going to have some type of impact on. Anyway,
Clearly,
Sorry, I'll just step in and take my turn. So I agree with what Phil said and the sentiment of everybody here. Notwithstanding, I had a different perspective of some of the questions, but the underlying thing here, to reiterate what Phil just said, if we don't have a say in doing this, modifying this, the government are going to do it to us, for sure. They're going to do it to us. So if we don't say what we want clearly and put our line in the sand, we're going to get it done to us, regardless of what our hopes or intents or ambitions might be. So the underlying thing with me is that we're dealing with all these issues that they're telling us to do. Local water done well, the regional development, all these things. And then we've got the council business as usual to get on with, which is considerable. So they have to resource this to a certain extent. That would be my bottom line, is that I'm open for change in any direction that the council sees fit, but it has to be resourced by central government, because with the ratepayers, we can't afford it.
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity to deal with all these things at the same time. And you know what, if we do, then it's going to fall on the ratepayer to fund them all. And that is simply unacceptable. That would be my red line on the sand. Sorry.
So possibly part of submission.
yeah, you sure? Well, you're always a good side with.
Thought it was the other way around, actually, Dave. First of all, I've got a lot of confidence in you two to go away and draft this up. I'm looking forward to what you come up with. It's been a really interesting discussion. I just want to suggest that maybe there can be some principles in there. I've done a lot of reading over the last 10 days, and I'm sure you two have as well. You look at the worldwide evidence, there is very little evidence to suggest that greater efficiencies are achieved through centralisation and amalgamation of local decision making. In fact, there's no evidence for greater efficiencies. No evidence for greater efficiencies. I mean, we can look at New Zealand, at Auckland, but worldwide evidence. Okay, and I've read UK, Canada, Europe. There is no evidence. There is sometimes contradictory evidence, but no conclusive evidence. What we do want is we want real economic growth. The evidence suggests that if you put local communities in charge of their own destiny and you give them the resources to be in charge of their own destiny, you will get real significant economic growth. Now, I'm sorry, but that is a kind of philosophical approach that probably this current government does not agree with. But we have to put the case anyway.
Just evidence that centralised government is more efficient. Lots of it. It's called a dictatorship and it's called tyranny. So what we want to do is we want to talk about effectiveness, effective government. Efficient government, you tell me what to do and I do it because you're a dictator, very efficient.
Wait a minute. We won the Second World War and they lost.
So back to that one.
So back to step one in the process. I feel like you've jumped a further step there, councillor Hingston.
Okay, look, dictatorship, yeah, they always say that the best form of government's a benevolent dictatorship. Where do you ever see that? You know, it's just something that never happens. Look, I just want to pick up on what Bill was saying, because it's quite relevant here that, you know, let's lay it on the table, folks. This is something that is about central government doing something that, and not just any central government, but a very, very right-leaning central government doing something that they've always done, and that is offset the costs to the communities and take the efficiencies to their own decision making to feather their own nests, and that is about Resource Management Act being gutted. Phil's pointed out that they are going to do some asset stripping of regional councils in terms of what their decision making is. That asset stripping will almost certainly take resource consenting in terms of being able to utilise resources to their own purposes to central government, to a central government operation. They've already indicated that and shown it through having a fast tracking legislation. So you guys got to realise that we will no longer have that regional autonomy around that. It's going to a central government. They will leave all of the cost with us as local government and all of the benefits with them, central government. And that's what this is about. And I'll utterly and completely state that now. This is about a resource divide, and it's about the costs being passed back to Joe Blow at the ground.
Very good. There was an article on the on Stuff, I guess, this morning or yesterday, the Auckland Mayor, you know, saying, well, you know, it's all very well putting a rates cap on, but it's going to be the ratepayers that actually wear it at the end of the day. You know, it's worth a can of beans. I don't know whether you saw that one or not. Yeah. Exactly the point.
So just before we break up, thank you very, very much. That's over 2.25 hours. That was really good in terms of conversation. We have a heap to get on with, and I hope we can do justice to what we've heard today as well. So we'll be in touch Friday afternoon, and we'll keep pushing on this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.